Welcome to my channel. Today, as a part of our cardiology series, our topic of discussion is mitral stenosis. Before we begin, let's first have a look at anatomy of mitral wall to understand the topic better. Location of the mitral wall: it is present between the left atrium and the left ventricle. It is made up of connective tissue called annulus with two leaflets. It is also called anterior leaflet and the posterior leaflet. Additional structure that are present in the mitral wall are papillary muscles and caudate tendineae. We will know why these structures are important. Since in cardiac cycle, the highest pressure phase is systole. So the aortic wall has to be open and the mitral wall has to be closed. To make sure that the mitral wall does not open during systole, these additional papillary muscles and the caudate tendineae are required. Mitral wall normal orifice size is 4 to 6 centimeters square. Less than 4 centimeters square is called mitral stenosis. Less than 1 centimeter square is known as severe mitral stenosis. In new edition, now it is given as less than 1.5 centimeters square. Now, coming to the definition of mitral stenosis, is a valvular heart disease characterized by narrowing of orifice of mitral wall, so that in this restriction of blood flow from left atrium to left ventricle during systole. Coming to causes, the most common cause is rheumatic heart disease. Others, left atrium myxoma. The tumor may be present in the left atrium that comes and blocks the mitral wall. Coming to the pathophysiology, during mitral stenosis, there will be decreased end diastolic volume that leads to the decreased stroke volume, leading to the fatigue and syncope. Other side, there will be also increased left atrial pressure due to narrowing of mitral wall. So, according to the Boyle's law, that is, pressure is inversely proportional to the volume, so that there will be a left atrial dilatation or compensatory dilatation. But it is only up to certain extent. After that, again the pressure of the left atrium increases, then the pressure in the pulmonary veins also gets increased. Since the pulmonary veins also does not want to burden the pulmonary capillaries, it will also gets dilated as long as it can. After that, the pulmonary capillaries also dilates since they don't want to burden the pulmonary artery. But it is also to some extent, so that leads to the pulmonary capillary congestion, which is leading to a dyspnea. And also because of the pulmonary congestion, there will be a pulmonary artery pressure raise that leads to the pulmonary hypertension, where we hear a loud P2. Another important thing is because of this left atrial dilatation, there will be the compression of the left recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is leading the to disturbance of the functional disturbance of the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is leading to the hoarseness of voice, and that manifestation is called as Ortner's syndrome. Next, symptoms: breathlessness due to pulmonary congestion and low cardiac output, fatigue, chest pain due to pulmonary hypertension, cough due to pulmonary congestion, hemoptysis due to pulmonary congestion, palpitations due to atrial fibrillation, edema and ascites due to left heart failure. On examination, blood pressure will be normal because of RAS mechanism. Amplitude will be, sorry, pulse will be low amplitude pulse. Apex beat will be undisplaced. We already discussed in the aortic stenosis, the apex beat will be displaced only in a conditions where there is eccentric left ventricular hypertrophy or dilatation. So, in this condition, there is no eccentric left ventricular hypertrophy or a dilatation. So, again, the apex beat will be undisplaced. Coming to the auscultation finding, we will see, like I hope by now you know that we expect a diastolic murmur in the mitral stenosis. So there will be opening snap and mid diastolic rumbling murmur with pre-systolic accentuation, which is best heard in the mitral area, breath held in expiration. As we go forward, you will understand much better. If blood has to come from left atrium to the left ventricle, that is from high pressure to the low pressure, at the end of systole, the left ventricular pressure will be very high. Atria cannot contract to build a pressure higher than ventricle or systolic pressure. So ventricle has to reduce its pressure to receive the blood from atria. So before starting of receiving the blood from left atria, ventricle has to reduce the pressure by relaxation. That is going to be the first part of diastole, which is known as isovolumetric relaxation. Once it lowered the pressure, mitral valve opens and then blood starts moving from left atria to left ventricle. As the diastole continues, blood is moving from atria to ventricle. So ventricle is getting filled and atria gets emptied. As ventricle is getting filled, the ventricular pressure increases. As atria gets emptied, the atrial pressure starts decreasing. So there will be a point where the pressure in the atria and ventricle are equalized. So once the two chambers are at equal pressure, will there be movement of blood? The important thing here is the phase where blood moved from atria to ventricle because of pressure difference, it is called passive filling. But after equalization of pressure, still, there will be some amount of blood in the atria. This has to be pushed into the ventricle. Now, the responsibility is on the atria. Atria has to contract so that its volume decreases and its pressure increases, and that pressure will help in transferring the remaining blood into ventricle, because at the end of passive filling, both chambers are at equal pressure. The thing here is, first there will be isovolumetric relaxation. After that, there will be passive filling because due to pressure difference. Then there will be active filling because of the contraction of atria. Understood? You can also see in the diagram. First, there will be isovolumetric relaxation. Then there is of opening snap. Then passive filling and active filling. There will be increased intensity in the active filling because atria is contracting, trying to push the blood through a very small opening so that the turbulence get increased. Whenever there is increased turbulence, the intensity gets increased. Means before systole started, the intensity of the murmur increased. That's why we are calling it as a pre-systolic accentuation. I think now you got idea why we call it as a pre-systolic accentuation. And mid diastolic rumbling murmur. Why we call it as a rumbling murmur? Because it is like whispering. Coming to the investigations, first one is echo, which is the investigation of choice, where there will be thickened immobile leaflets, reduced valve area, enlarged left atrium, reduced rate of diastolic filling of left ventricle. ECG, there will be the right ventricular hypertrophy or there will be atrial fibrillation. Chest X-ray, enlarged left atrium and appendage, signs of pulmonary venous congestion. Coming to management, mitral valvoplasty is the treatment of choice. You can see in the image, a wide gyre is introduced into the right atrium from the femoral vein and IVC. The intraatrial septum is punctured, providing access to the left atrium and mitral valve. A balloon catheter is advanced over guide wire across the mitral valve and the balloon dilated to stretch the valve and reduce the degree of stenosis. Criteria for mitral valvoplasty. There should be significant symptoms and isolated mitral stenosis. There should be no mitral regurgitation. It should be mobile, non-calcified valve. Left atrium should be free of thrombus. Mitral valve replacement is considered in patients with contraindications for balloon mitral valvoplasty. Coming to the complications, because of the compression of the left recurrent laryngeal nerve, there will be Ortner syndrome and atrial fibrillation, and the stroke risk will be increased because of the atrial fibrillation. I hope this video was useful to everyone who watched it. In my next video, we will discuss about aortic regurgitation and mitral regurgitation.